We're talking about education across Tennessee. Beth Brown is my guest from the Tennessee Education Association. Thank you once again for being here. We're kind of resetting here at the half hour. We've talked a lot about what the governor is proposing through his State of the State address and his budget proposal this year. I do want to talk about something that we've been talking about for several years now, school vouchers, this new ESA program that some are saying let's go ahead and start it a year earlier than anticipated. I know you all don't like the idea of charter schools per se. Why? Can you explain that?
Well, so vouchers and charter schools are not necessarily the same thing, two different issues. Charter schools have the ability to pick and choose the students that they want to accept into their school. As a public educator in the state of Tennessee, I don't pick and choose my students. I take every single student who walks through the door, and I love him or her. I don't always like them, but I always love them, you know, because we all have bad days.
Oh yeah.
But you know, that is the beauty of a public school, is we take everybody and we meet them where they are, and we work with them to help them to accomplish their goals and achieve their dreams. And charter schools don't necessarily have the same rules. They don't have to take every single student. They can choose. They can choose to accept someone, and then if that student doesn't perform at the level that the school would like, then they can bid them goodbye. And they're also not held to the same accountability measures. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about teacher accountability, student accountability. Charter schools don't have that same accountability. So yeah. So you know, when you're talking about comparing public schools to charter schools, you're not comparing apples and oranges. You're
Even though they
two
fall
different
under
things.
the state board or the local board, it's not the same standard.
Not the same standard. So, you know, again, that's the beauty of our public schools, is we take them all and we love them all and we educate them all.
Okay, let's talk about ESAs and school vouchers. Give me the lowdown.
Well, I don't think there's anybody in the state who does not know that the Tennessee Education adamantly opposed the voucher bill that was adopted last spring. You know, I remember sitting in the gallery and watching the bill pass, and I remember when it passed in the Senate, I walked out onto the balcony of the Capitol building, and I just kind of had to stand there, and I was grieving. I just kind of hung my head and just had to take some deep breaths, because I thought, our state has just passed this bill that is going to take funding that is so critical to our schools, to our already under-resourced schools, and they're going to send them out to these private entities that don't have the same accountability standards. And we've never talked about the real issue. We've never talked about barriers to student success. All we've done is talk about who's going to get money, but we've never really talked about adverse childhood experiences, or what is keeping our students from being as successful as we need them to be. That was never part of the conversation. So had some really deep hurt in my heart, and I know in the hearts of educators across the state, when we saw our state pass a law that was going to divert funding from our schools and send them to private schools without any accountability.
And explain how that happens. How was the money being taken from here and put to here?
Well, the bill that was finally passed, you know, first of all, there was never the same version of the bill that visited any committee, because you know, when you think about a bill passing in the Tennessee General Assembly, it has to go through a variety of committees. No committee ever saw the same version of the bill, which in and of itself is a red flag right there, that there are all of these problems within the proposed law. And when it was first presented, it was going to be much more expansive. It was going to include many more counties than just Shelby and Davidson. Ultimately, what was passed was a bill that limited the program to Shelby County and Davidson County, and what it does is it creates this I don't know if they're going to do a debit card, or they're still fleshing out what kind of dispensing system they're going to use, but essentially it's taking about $7,000 or $7,300 and sending it to a family who chooses to accept the voucher. The law in the first year is open to 5,000 students in Shelby and Metro Nashville schools. And a family can petition to get that voucher, and then they can go spend that money on private school tuition.
And so that means that money is not going to that public school where the child would be attending.
Correct.
Yeah, it will go to whatever school then is chosen.
Correct.
And what the question is, will the private schools accept this? Because if you look in Davidson County, many of the private schools' tuition is far beyond.
Yeah, and when and there has been a list, and it's 53, 57. I can't remember how many schools have applied to be on the approved voucher recipient list. But they are schools where that $7,000 is not nearly going to cover the tuition costs or the other costs associated with attending that school. And so the argument that this program is supposed to save our poor kids in Shelby County and in Metro Nashville just doesn't really hold water to me, because that's not going to cover all of the costs. So let's talk about what this is really about. And it's not about saving our poor kids.
What do you think it's about?
Well, it's about giving money to private schools. It's about defunding our public schools. That's what it is. And what you're left with are schools that were already under-resourced that now have even fewer resources, and they're going to have the students with the greatest need. Because remember, those private schools and those charter schools, they're not going to take students that have all those significant challenges. And so your public schools are left to do more with even less.
Do you think it's a matter of time before this program falls flat, or do you think it's a matter of time before they just keep changing it and changing it and changing it? That's a tough call. I know that TEA expressed tremendous concern last year when the bill was being rolled out, when it was up for debate in the General Assembly. You know, it's modeled after programs in other states like Arizona and Florida, which have proven to be horrendous. Not only are those programs ripe with fraud, but also when you go back and study the data, students who take vouchers and go to non-public schools don't actually do better academically, they do worse. Wow. And so we're not helping our kids out. As you work on Capitol Hill throughout this budget process, just when it comes to the ESA, what are your efforts? What are they looking like, the efforts? What are you trying to do? Well,
there are a couple of things that are floating around the Capitol right now. The first thing that I would say is, you know, and you alluded to this earlier, there is discussion about trying to start the program a year earlier than what lawmakers thought. So the governor wants to see this rolled out this year in the 2020-2021 school year. That is creating some problems, and you know, this has been covered in the news quite a bit with the no bid contract that was awarded to Class Wallet out of Florida. So I know that the department is being questioned about that, and the fact that that contract did not go in front of the Fiscal Review Committee in the General Assembly. So there are some questions about that. There are also a lot of questions about some of the lawsuits that have been filed recently, questioning the constitutionality of the bill and the fact that this law is restricted to only 2 counties, and you can't do that in this state. That's illegal. It's unconstitutional. And so there are lawsuits that have been filed, and you know, we're hearing some legislators saying, why would we want to invest a whole lot of money in a program that the courts may find to be unconstitutional? We're just taking more money from our schools and throwing it away. And so that's a grave concern. And another topic that we're hearing legislators discuss is the fact that the contract that has been awarded to this Florida company significantly exceeds the amount of money that was put into last year's budget for year 1 of the ESA program. You know, what was adopted in the budget last year was like $770,000-ish, maybe 776. I'd have to go back and look, but that's about how much money they had put in the budget for year 1 of of the ESA program. The contract that was awarded, this 2-year contract to Class Wallet, is for $2.5 million, which is $1.25 million for year one. $1.25 million is a lot more than $776,000. So the question has been asked to the state, well, where did you get that money? Do you know where they got that money?
Where?
They took it from a fund that is designated for teacher salaries.
So we've looped right back to where we started at in this conversation.
We have taken money out of a fund that was designated for teacher salaries to pay for this no-bid contract for this program that's being challenged in the court as unconstitutional.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really all you can say is wow, you know. So yeah, I can't tell you what our legislators are going to do. I can tell you what I hope that they will do, but I think my hope, the TA's hope, is that we would at least pump the brakes on this and say we will not implement this before July 1, 2021, at least. Would I be excited about a full-out repeal? Absolutely. That bill was passed in a corrupt manner, and it is not what's best for our public schools. I would love to see a full-out repeal. And we're certainly advocating for that, but at the very least, we need to pump the brakes on this and say this is not ready to go in 2021.
It's something we're all watching very closely.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to the lines. We have Eric on the line. Hi, Eric. Thank you for being part of the show. What's your comment or question for Beth?
Yes, my question is, I drive a Metro school bus, and my concern has always been when we give this money to these charter schools, ultimately, these charter schools can release these children if they get to the point they're too difficult or their grades don't live up to their standard. Do they have to give that money back that they got for that student?
Good question. All right, Eric, I'm going to put you on hold, so listen to your TV and we'll give you the answer.
Hi, Eric. First of all, thank you so very much for being a Metro school bus driver. You know, we have to pause and celebrate the fact that our school bus drivers are both the first and the last people that our kids see. And so thank you so much for what you do for all of our bus drivers and our education support professionals. They are a lot of times the unsung heroes in our school district. So I want to say thank you first. And that is a great question. Do they have to give back the money? The answer is no. That's, you know, there's some really weird rules about, you know, the funding that goes with the student and how long they have to be there before the school just keeps it, but then they can send the student back and the money does not follow. So the short answer is no, they don't have to give it back.
All right, great question, Eric. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to Reverend Fuzz. Hi, Reverend Fuzz. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, thank you. Let me ask a couple of questions real quick. Number one, you know, I guess just factually, how much is needed to what you call fund teacher pay? To put it at, you know, where it ought to be from your perspective, what you think, so how much money is needed? And on this voucher program, they're only like opening like 5,000 slots for vouchers as a trial thing, I guess. So compared to how many students are in schools in those two counties, I know like, what, 80,000 here in Davidson County is probably like 100,000. So you're talking like 200,000 kids. So 5,000 out of those 200,000 in a trial. What would be the real damage there? And I've been attending American Federation of Children. I think you'll know that organization, and they got another big conference coming up. What should I be expecting there, or what should I be going there in mindset and saying to them? What ought to be the message?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Reverend Fuzz.
Thank you, sir. So several questions there. I hope that I've gotten them jotted down. First of all, how much is needed in terms of funding? We need $1.2 billion to get Tennessee to the regional average, to the Southeast average. That's middle of the pack. That's not top of the region. That is just to get us to the middle of the pack, $1.2 billion.
And that would include getting teachers paid what they should be paid.
It would help.
It would help.
It would help.
Get us about average.
It would get us to the Southeast region average in terms of per pupil funding. Teacher salary is a component of per pupil funding. As far as what's the damage when you talk about a voucher program that is limited to 5,000 students, I would offer two thoughts. First of all, it's 5,000 for the first year with the idea that is going to grow. The bill is written, the law is written to expand the program. The other thing that I try to explain to people who have a similar question is when you talk about pulling the funds out of the schools, you're not pulling them out in whole chunks. So let me just use my school as an example. My school is not in Davidson County, but it's what I know. So,
sure.
So let's say that my school, which has about 650 students, let's just say we had 30 students who decided to take a voucher. Mm-hmm. Well, if they were all 12th graders, you might be able to cut one 12th grade position. If they were all 11th grade, or if you're talking about an elementary school, if they were all in 3rd grade, you might be able to cut a teaching position and see some savings there. But what happens is those students are not coming mm-hmm. from the same classrooms, they're not necessarily coming from the same schools, so the funds needed to operate those schools aren't significantly
changing.
Well, they're
sure.
not changing. Yeah. So again, you're drawing funds away from schools, and those are funds that they desperately need in order to provide services for the students who attend those schools.
I'm going to put the pause on you right there. We'll answer the third part of that question when we come back. We have to sneak in a break. Stay tuned.